What did you think when you heard that he was found guilty?
You should have never been in there. That's the truth.
Right.
27 years in jail for something you didn't do.
The system took his life.
Did the police ever talk to you about that night?
Is there any physical evidence that proved Roosevelt was not involved in this murder?
Does this crime look like a random robbery to you?
The woman that I met, your fiancée, Tanya, she will be with you regardless. Did you have anything to do with Tony Brandon's murder? I'm Chris Anderson, a retired Birmingham homicide investigator. And I know cops don't always get it right.
I'm Fatima Silva. I'm a criminal defense attorney. I've seen innocent people thrown in prison.
We've teamed up to help families who are convinced their loved ones were wrongfully convicted of murder. When it's over, we either help free an innocent prisoner
Or help the family face the difficult truth.
November 16th, 1992, 2:45 in the morning, Chicago's West Side. 16-year-old Tony Brandon walks out of an apartment building with his 15-year-old girlfriend, Octavius. A man jumps out from behind a tree, fires twice, and then runs off, leaving Tony Brandon dead. Although nothing is taken, police are convinced it's a robbery gone bad. Weeks later, they arrest a low-level drug dealer named Roosevelt Blue Miles.
For the next 3 years, Roosevelt sits in jail awaiting trial. Finally, in early 1996, he gets his day in court. Prosecutors have no physical evidence, just a couple of witnesses, and that proves to be enough. Roosevelt Miles is convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 60 years in prison.
Sharon, you've been fighting for your brother since 1992. That's dedication. So tell me, what keeps you going?
Knowing that he'll get out and be free and live a life.
Now, Tanya, you met Roosevelt behind bars, so tell me, how did that happen?
Well, my sister-in-law, Sharon, here, introduced us.
Sharon, why did you think that Tanya would be someone that you could introduce to your brother?
He's a talker, and he will talk. And so is she. I felt that their personality was similar. I said, oh, yeah, she can get him off my back a little bit.
Now, initially, did you think that he may be guilty of this crime?
He told me, don't believe anything he says, that he can show me. And as I continued to look into this case, I believed him.
It's got to be tough to keep going. Has there ever been a time where you just thought to accept the judgment of the system and let this entire case go?
I don't want to give up, because that means I give up on him.
You know, I keep fighting for him because I believe. I can never turn my back on him. Every morning when he wakes up and he looks around, you know, he's like, damn, I'm still here. And he shouldn't be.
I just believe in him. I got faith in him. I'm not giving up.
So let's go back to 1992 now. Tanya, I know you weren't in the picture then, so I'll have to address most of these to Sharon. When did you realize that Roosevelt was a suspect?
A couple of days, I guess, after this happened, they picked him up. And I'm like, they know that's not true. He wasn't an angel, but he wasn't that type of person.
So let's just put our cards out on the table. Tell us, what kind of trouble had Roosevelt been in prior to this?
Petty credit card, fraudulent charges.
So theft?
Yeah.
Anything else?
Drugs.
Was he selling drugs or was he using drugs?
Both.
What kind of dealer was he? Was he pretty heavy on the streets or was he just a small time?
Small time.
He was small time. It's always been my experience as a detective that drug dealing and violence, they go hand in hand. You see where I'm going with this?
I see where you're going with it.
The legal system sees Roosevelt as just a number, another inmate. What are they missing? Tell me who he really is.
He is really a loving, caring, honest individual.
He's always been funny. He always been a joker. He's kind-hearted.
What was the home life like?
My parents disciplined, they value education, but he liked the street life more.
Now, you guys gave us some leads that you believe would convince us to join your fight. Your first lead was that he has an alibi.
Yes.
Can you explain that?
There was a guy, Michael Hooker, who was outside of an apartment building that Roosevelt exited after the shooting. That was his alibi.
Did he testify at trial?
No.
How far was this apartment building that Roosevelt was at from where the individual was shot?
Like about maybe 3-4 houses down.
Your next lead cuts to the heart of this case. You say the main witness who identified Roosevelt didn't actually even see his face. Explain that to me.
Yeah, it was a prostitute. She was in the car like 100 feet away, and she didn't even see his face, but she said the person moved like him.
How well does she know Roosevelt?
Just seeing people in the neighborhood, not really knowing them.
Is this woman still alive?
No.
Chris, have you ever heard of somebody identifying someone by their movement?
It's possible, but what I would expect from the person that's doing the identification is a very, very close relationship to the person that they're implicating in this
Right.
crime. Somebody that you see on the streets, I question that.
Wasn't there another witness?
There was a 15-year-old that was with the victim at that time when they came out the house. But then she came with the affidavit and said the only reason why she said that it was Roosevelt is because she was being coerced.
Coerced by who, the police?
Yes.
So the next lead you gave us was that based on the height and trajectory of the bullets that killed the victim, it proves that it couldn't have been Roosevelt. Explain that to me.
Whoever done it was taller and was left-handed, and my brother was right-handed.
Taller, I could probably see. I've never heard of being able to tell by trajectory which hand the person shot with. That has to be tested.
Now, your next lead is that Tony Brandon's murder was a gang hit, not a robbery gone wrong.
That hour of the morning for some random person to be hiding under a porch waiting on kids, it sounds more like an ambush or a setup.
Yeah, it doesn't sound random at all. It sounds more personal.
And nothing was taken from them, right?
Right.
But didn't the witness who was with the victim tell police that the shooter shouted it was a stick-up?
Yeah.
Your last lead is one lead that we hear a lot, that Roosevelt had no motive to commit this crime. Now, why is that? Because you've already admitted that he has a criminal past.
Why would he be interested in teenagers? He didn't even know them. Why would he wait at 2:45 in the morning to shoot some teenagers?
You did say that Roosevelt was on drugs. Could this
Yeah.
not be a robbery for him to get more drugs?
No.
What we do know about Roosevelt is that he has taken things that don't belong to him in the past. So
Right.
is it possible that maybe that night he was just waiting to rob anyone? Two kids come out and the gun misfires and that's why he runs.
No, he was never anywhere in Roosevelt's history about any violence, any gunplay, any of that.
Fatima and I are completely independent in our investigations. What if we investigate this case and determine that Roosevelt is right where he needs to be?
I would be so hurt because out of all these years, I truly believe that he is innocent. He did petty stuff, but capital murder, he is not that type of person. No.
His parents taught him some morals and some values. And even though he strayed away in the street, taught him a thing or two. Murder just wasn't it.
I would still love him. I never stopped loving him. But it's just something inside of me that say that he didn't.
So, Doctor, I'm looking into an unusual case where the eyewitness didn't actually see the suspect's face. First off, have you ever seen a case where someone was identified by the way that they walk, the shape of their bodies, anything of that nature?
Those types of cases do happen, but the traditional kind of lineup that we see is when somebody is identifying somebody's facial features.
So do you think these kinds of identifications can be reliable?
I think if it's somebody they know really well, that can be a very good identification, but when the eyewitness does not know the perpetrator as well, it's not going to be quite as reliable.
Apparently the shooter shouted a few quick words, so I would think that could influence the witness too.
Yes.
Another factor in this case is the ID witness, who's no longer alive, is sitting in a car maybe 100 feet away from the shooting. And plus, this is at night. How much would that affect a positive ID?
Well, we're going to put all of that to the test tonight.
Coming up.
The truth is the truth.
I know he innocent. He didn't do that.
I need you to be completely honest about everything that we talk about.
I'm gonna give it to you just like I know
Please
it.
do. When was it that you started using drugs?
Now, that's a cold question.
Roosevelt Miles was convicted of shooting a teenage boy on Chicago's West Side in 1992. But his fiancée and sister insist that there's no way the prosecution's key witness could have identified him. I'm speaking to an eyewitness expert to find out if that's true. The ID witness, who's no longer alive, is sitting in a car maybe 100 feet away from the shooting. And plus, this is at night. How much would that affect a positive ID?
Well, we're going to put all of that to the test tonight. We're going to recreate the night of the murder. I have a volunteer sitting in a car about 100 feet away. She's brought along one friend, and I brought in two guys who she does not know at all. A young couple will walk out of this door, and one of the guys is going to jump out from behind this tree. Then we're going to ask the woman in the car if she can tell whether that's her friend or not.
All right, Erica.
Was that your friend?
No, that was not my friend.
We're going to do this 8 times in a row and see what we come up with.
This is a stick-up.
Hey, Erica, could you make an ID then?
I don't know.
This is a stick-up.
That was a no.
This is a stick-up, homie.
What about that one, Erica?
That was not him.
This is a stick-up.
That was him.
This is a stick-up.
No, that was not him.
This is a stick-up, homie.
No, that wasn't him. That was not him.
So, Doctor, what does this test tell you?
Well, she was pretty accurate. There was one I don't know when the perpetrator was not her friend, but overall she was able to differentiate between the person that she knew and the people that she didn't.
Based on this test, do you think it's possible that a person could make an identification from 100 feet away, dark like it is now, on a person that they knew and they didn't see their face?
It certainly seems possible.
So, Michael, as you know, we're here for Roosevelt Miles' family. We know that you may have some information about the night of the murder. So are you willing to talk to us about that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So Roosevelt went by the nickname Blue, right?
Yeah.
How do you know Blue?
We grew up together.
You grew up
On the
together.
block, yeah.
What's Blue like?
He's a character. You know, he likes to joke around a lot.
Tell me what you remember about that night that Tony Brandon was murdered.
It's been a while.
But you do remember seeing Blue that night?
Yes.
Where do you remember seeing him?
We was right here at this building right
Is
here.
that building right there?
Yes. We was all together. And that Blue left.
Blue left?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we heard a couple of bullets fired off. You know, didn't think nothing of it.
Where were you when the gunshots went
We
off?
was
Are
in
you
the front,
outside here or are
right
you
here.
in a car?
In the car.
You hear some gunshots?
Yes.
You don't even get scared?
No. Yeah,
Everyday thing here.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, at some point, do you see Blue again?
When the gunshots rang, Blue was coming out of the apartment.
Did you guys talk?
Yeah, he's ready to go home.
Since Blue wasn't with you, is it possible that he was the shooter?
At no time he can go around there to shoot anybody. When the shooting went off, he was coming out the building. Blue came out what, 20 seconds?
So you don't think it's possible that
no
he was
way,
the shooter?
No way. It wasn't even a minute. It was like 20 seconds.
How about what you know about Blue? I mean, is he violent? Does he go around robbing people?
No, Blue really didn't fight. Never pick up a gun. It's not Blue. Talking about robbing and killing and anything like that, that's not Blue. No. No way.
Did the police ever talk to you about that night?
No.
No?
No.
You gotta explain this to me, because if my friend was getting these charges and I knew that they weren't involved, I would obviously speak up and go to the police.
I didn't know to the extent that they were really pursuing them.
You're not lying for your childhood friend?
For what? Why should I lie?
You were friends.
Okay, but still, I won't put myself in that position to lie about something like that. Blue is not that person. No way. He never hold a gun, my knowledge in his life. He was like me, scared. You know, we wasn't into none of that. Ain't no way he could have done it. I just wish I could have just did more for me.
Coming up,
Does Roosevelt seem like the kind of guy who would be called upon by a gang to carry out a hit?
Was there ever a time that you joined a gang?
I wouldn't even call it a gang.
What would you call it?
Vice lords.
Roosevelt? That's a gang. So Tim, I know you've looked over all the documentation on the case that I'm investigating. The family has some serious concerns about the crime scene investigation. Number one, they say the shooter had to have been taller than Roosevelt, and the trajectory proves it. What was the trajectory of this bullet?
According to the autopsy report, the bullet entered the victim in the stomach area and exited in the back, basically a level trajectory.
What does that say about the height of the shooter?
That would indicate that the shooter had to have been very close in height to the victim.
The victim in this case is 5'6", and Roosevelt is 5'8". Is that in the same range?
Yes.
So when the family says that the shooter would have had to have been much taller than Roosevelt, they're incorrect.
Yes.
Based on everything you've seen, what conclusions can you draw of what happened that night?
I believe the shooter was within a few feet of the victim when the first shot was fired. My guess is the victim would have then doubled over in pain. And I believe the second shot entered the subject's left shoulder and lodged in the subject's right pelvis. And I believe that the second shot is probably the one that killed him.
Now, the family's next concern is that they think that the shooter had to have been left-handed, and Roosevelt, the convict, he's right-handed. Now, I have my ideas about that, but what do you make of it?
There's no way to determine whether someone was using their dominant or non-dominant hand.
So based on everything you've seen and everything you showed me, is there any physical evidence that proved Roosevelt was not involved in this murder?
There was nothing in the crime scene evidence that would prove his innocence.
So, Derek, I'm looking into a murder case that took place in this neighborhood. Now, you grew up around here, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Were you heavily involved in gangs back then?
Yes, I was heavily involved in the gang and the streets.
Tell me more about that.
It was sort of what you would call like a way of life. We were all a product of our environment in this community. High drug activities and gang activities.
What gang were you a part of?
I was a part of the Vice Lords.
How did you get out of the gang lifestyle?
By the grace of God.
What was this neighborhood like back in the 1990s?
Gangs ran the communities. Gangs were the employers of the community. This neighborhood was infested with crack, killings, prostitution.
So let's move on to the Roosevelt Miles case. Do you remember the case?
I heard of it, but I didn't know him.
You've had a chance to look over the police files. Does this crime look like a random robbery to you?
Just from my experience, it don't look like a robbery.
But Octavius told police that the shooter came up and said, "This is a stick-up."
Bugs Bunny says that. Stick up. Normally, when somebody gets stacked up, they pull a gun out and tell them, you know what time it is. That time of night, it wasn't a robbery. And
So then what's it look like to you? What kind of crime?
That's a hit that has revenge written all over it.
Does Roosevelt seem like the kind of guy who would be called upon by a gang to carry out a hit?
His background don't say nothing about aggressiveness, nothing about murdering, killing, harming people. I know that he was wrongfully convicted.
Some things that don't sit right with me at all. He's a small-time drug dealer. He's out at 2:45 in the morning, and he's around the corner from where the murder takes place. None of those things look good.
None of them look good, but none of them immediately suggest that he's involved. Think about it. At 2:45 in the morning, the suspect in this case is waiting under a stairway when someone comes out of the house. I mean, who does that? Nobody does that unless they absolutely know that there will be someone coming out of that house at 2:45. That spells setup. Person jumps out, says what he says, then immediately shoots the victim. That says setup. That person then takes off running. The entire shooting within itself all spells setup.
So tomorrow's important. I'm going to sit down with two of Roosevelt's friends. I want to know what Roosevelt was like back in 1992. It just seems like if he did this hit, he's got to have some violent tendencies or some history of aggression.
Tomorrow I'm going to drive up to the prison and meet with Roosevelt face to face. And I have a lot of questions for him. What kind of drug dealer was he? What was he doing out that night?
And I hope by this age he's ready to admit everything, the good, the bad, the ugly about his past.
I don't think I've had a case that I've been more on the fence about.
The hunch that I'm feeling is this is a street crime, and I hate to say it, but I just think that's when police work is at its sloppiest.
I'm driving out to interview Roosevelt Miles in prison. I plan to find out exactly how deep Roosevelt was into drugs and gangs. I need to see if he's the kind of guy who might get hired to carry out a hit. What was young Roosevelt like? Were your parents very disciplined when you were growing up?
Oh, talking about discipline, yes, yes. If you didn't go to school, you didn't live there. I had strict parents.
I know some strict parents that have raised some serious killers. What age did you begin to sell drugs?
24.
What were you selling?
Marijuana and PCP. That was my biggest mistake.
Would you consider yourself to be a low-level dealer, or would you consider yourself to be one of the men?
No, low level.
Okay.
Mediocre.
Now, look, I don't want you to sugarcoat anything. I just need you to be completely honest about everything that we talk about.
I'm gonna give it to you just like I know.
Please do, please do, because if what happens a lot of times in these interviews that I do is the person that I'm talking to gives me this wonderful sunlights and rainbows and roses story about their history, and then I go through my investigation and I find out the underbelly of what they really are, and it makes me distrust them.
And that's right.
And I don't want to distrust you. I want to hear the truth about Roosevelt. So I'm gonna start asking you some questions. They won't be so rosy, and I want to hear it.
You're gonna give them. I'm gonna give it to you just like I got.
When was it that you started using drugs?
Now that's a cold question.
Coming up. Now, I'm not trying to be rude, but you can save me on all of that because I already know what gangs did in the 1980s and 90s. When was it that you started using drugs?
Now, that's a cold question. In between 26 and 27, I started snorting white heroin. That was my downfall. And I had a dealer habit, selling in two. And that habit, I wouldn't want nobody to have that. Because life goes by you.
Was there ever a time that you joined a gang in Chicago?
I wouldn't even call it a gang.
What would you call it?
me and my buddies, we protected the neighborhood.
Okay.
You know, but we never went out gangbanging in different neighborhoods.
So what gang were you a part of?
Vice Lords.
Roosevelt? That's a gang.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, but we never went out and gangbang. See, we call it organization. We cleaned up the neighborhoods. We did a lot. Now you understand?
No, I don't, but I'm not trying to be rude, but you can save me on all of that because I already know what gangs did in the 1980s and 90s.
Roosevelt's family said he had no motive to kill Tony Brandon. They said he would never hurt anyone and didn't even carry a gun. I'm meeting with two of his old friends to see if Roosevelt had any history of violence.
How did you guys first become friends with Roosevelt?
We grew up in the same neighborhood.
What was he like?
I put him as a comedian. He always got a joke or a laugh or something.
Would he act like a tough guy?
No, he's not a tough guy. He was never a tough guy. His whole persona was just trying to make a little money to do drugs, like we was.
Did you ever know him to carry a weapon such as a gun?
No.
Hell, I ain't never known him to carry a knife.
Let's go back to that night, November 16th, 1992. This is the night that changed the whole trajectory of your life.
That's changed my life.
What time did you go out that night?
I went to the club at 11:30, 12 o'clock to go shoot some pool.
Okay, so you were going there just to shoot pool?
Yeah, to gamble.
How did you do that day?
So I stayed there about an hour, hour and a half. No, I didn't shoot because they weren't there, so I left.
So you didn't make no money on the pool table?
No, I left. Walked down to Ronnie's house. I saw Michael Hooker sitting in the car.
Why were you looking for Ronnie?
Getting him to sell some stuff.
Sell some stuff like what?
Cocaine.
Okay.
You know? So I went to his house. He was in the house. We talked for a while, about an hour. So soon I left out the house. I walked down the stairs, flight of stairs. I heard a shot go boom, boom. I'm looking, but I don't see nothing moving. So I walked to the Dragons. And I stayed at the Dragons all night until about 5 or 6 that morning, gambling, shooting pool.
Okay.
You know?
What about Sandra, the prostitute who ID'd you?
She said I had on red, but she said she never saw no face.
But she knows you.
Yeah, but if you know me, then why would you say you never saw a face? You just saw red clothes. But I never had on red. I don't wear red clothing.
You don't wear red clothing?
No, I don't wear a red jacket.
The jail picture that I had, you got on the red jacket.
You got to wear it in prison. That's a work camp. You got to.
Were you surprised when you were arrested for this charge?
Yeah, definitely. You know, they dogged me, man, and shouldn't nobody go through what I went through. I don't kill, I don't hurt. I'm a lightweight drug dealer.
So you hear that Blue's in jail for killing someone, and what's your initial thought?
I said, no, that's not Blue. No way. He don't have the heart to kill nobody or stick nobody up.
No.
He don't have that heart.
According to the police, the shooter in this case says stick him up and then shoots the victim.
They ain't gonna say no damn stick him up. That's from the 50s.
Have you ever heard that, Mickey?
There's no black person in the city of Chicago gonna say it's a stick up.
He's gonna say that.
Does this crime look like a robbery to you?
No, it doesn't look like a robbery.
What's it look like?
It's like somebody was looking to kill somebody.
Like a targeted killing?
Yes.
So you don't think it was random?
No, it wasn't.
Being in prison, has it changed your life?
Being in prison has taught me to be a better person in life. My compassion for others has blossomed. I'm gonna get back to the communities that I really took advantage of with the drugs.
Is that what you think about being here?
Yeah.
Giving back to the community that you took from?
Yeah. I want to be I want to be somebody that people proud of seeing. You know, I want that in life.
What did you think when you heard that he was found guilty?
I couldn't believe they gave that man 60 years. I said, Mark, they said 60 years. I'm thinking, it's a joke. How you gonna give him 60 years?
Once the truth out, I'm gonna see him and hug him again.
The truth is the truth. Seriously, you should have never been in there. That's the truth.
Right.
27 years in jail for something you didn't do.
Right. I know he innocent. He didn't do that. No, he didn't do that.
The woman that I met, your fiance Tanya, she will be with you regardless. If you were to tell her today that you had something to do with this, it would free her. Because honestly, she and your sister, they're both spending time with you. If there is something that you could say today that would help free them, then maybe you did do this. Maybe the Roosevelt of old, the Roosevelt that you used to be did commit this murder. I was low on cash. I was in a downward spiral. Wait a minute, just listen to me, just listen. I didn't want to do it, but I mistakenly shot this young man.
I mean, we gonna stop all this. I can't tell them I done something I didn't do. Then I'm lying to them. I've been real to them. So if I tell them I done it, I'm lying. So I can't free their soul with a lie.
Did you have anything to do with Tony Brandon's murder?
No, nothing. Nothing at all. I don't even know how the man look. Nothing. Nothing.
Roosevelt Miles has quite the team fighting for him. A sister who's loved him since he was a baby, and a fiance praying for the chance to grow old with him.
So you guys gave us 5 leads. Leads you hope will help us join in the fight with you. We looked into each one of those, and here's what we found. Okay.
The first lead you gave us was, based on the bullet's trajectories and the wounds on the victim, the shooter had to be left-handed and much taller than Roosevelt. So we brought in an independent trajectory expert to take a look at the evidence. Now, as far as the shooter being left or right-handed, our expert says that doesn't affect the bullet's trajectory at all. But the trajectory can tell us about how tall or how short a person is. The first bullet hit the victim in the stomach. It was a straight-on shot. It almost had no angle to it. So according to our expert, that means that the shooter was around the same height as the victim. Roosevelt was 5'8". The victim in this case is 5'6". The second shot had a huge angle. And I think that's why you guys may think the shooter had to have been taller than Roosevelt. But our expert believes that after the first shot, the victim then doubled over, which explains why the bullet came in through the shoulder and ended up in the victim's pelvis. So the evidence doesn't show that the shooter had to be taller than Roosevelt. In fact, if anything, he may have been a little bit shorter. So unfortunately, this lead, it doesn't work out for you.
Okay. I can understand the finding, but that's just one lead.
Now, your next lead was that Roosevelt had an alibi, that a guy named Michael Hooker saw Roosevelt leaving an apartment building right after the gunshots rang out. So it took a lot of effort, but we managed to track down Michael Hooker. It's been a long time, and his memory is fuzzy, but he sticks to his story. And I found him fairly credible, so this is a good lead.
And it really bothers me that the cops never interviewed him back then.
The system failed Roosevelt.
It was like a bad movie.
The system took his life.
Tanya, your frustration is absolutely warranted. He was failed.
Right.
The next lead you gave us was that both witnesses who identified Roosevelt were unreliable. The first one is the young girl, Octavius, who walked out of the building with the victim. We reached out to her, but she has made it very clear that she does not want any part of what we're doing. But as you said the other day, she has recanted her testimony. The other witness was a prostitute who was seen in the car 100 feet away. Now, the lighting is poor, and she admitted that she didn't see Roosevelt's face. She identified him based on the way that he moved. Now, we couldn't talk to her because she died many years ago. So we conducted an experiment. We put a female volunteer in a car on a dark street, and we reenacted the entire crime scene 8 times.
This is the stick-up.
Some of the time, men she didn't know played the shooter, but a couple of times, a friend of hers did. They wore red hoodies, and there was no way for her to see their faces. And to our surprise, she actually got it right 7 out of the 8 times. Now, to be fair, the volunteer said that she identified them by their voices as much as by their body movements. But overall, assuming that this prostitute did know Roosevelt, it's possible that she could have identified him just by his movements. So, unfortunately, this lead doesn't work for you.
Well, I disagree, but I'm not the expert.
It was just a lot to take in. I'm speechless right now.
Your next lead is that the shooting doesn't look like a random robbery, like the police claimed that it was. You say it looks more like an ambush, maybe a gang hit of some kind. So we spoke to someone who used to be one of the leaders of the Vice Lords, the gang Roosevelt says that he was in. The former gang leader says that there are 3 things about the shooting that make him feel like this was not a robbery. 1, it was 2:45 in the morning. What made him think anyone was coming out of the house at that hour? Number 2, the shooter didn't take anything. He just ran away when Tony went down. And finally, the shooter yelled out something like, "Stick 'em up." Our expert says that's not something anyone from the street would say.
Right.
It's just way too corny, honestly.
It is.
According to the former gang leader, this was no robbery. Somebody wanted Tony dead. So this is a good lead.
Well, that's what I said all the time. Who just sits at 2:45 in the morning waiting on some unsuspecting individual?
As an investigator, I would have a hard time believing that this was just a robbery.
Now, your last lead was that Roosevelt had no motive to kill Tony Brandon. That even though Roosevelt was a hustler and a drug dealer, he had no history of violence. I tracked down 2 of Roosevelt's childhood friends, Mickey and Chris. Now, to be clear, they're friends, so they're not exactly objective. But there is one thing that they were both very clear and very adamant about. Roosevelt would never shoot anyone.
Blue was never a violent person. He was never a violent person where he'd go up to rob a person and like that. He was never that.
He was capable of stealing.
Yeah, that's theft. Right.
A petty theft.
But
Petty theft.
robbing somebody, no. He was never that.
So it's a good lead.
It makes me happy. That just wasn't in his character.
But I have to say this. When I spoke with Roosevelt, he did give me a little bit of motive. He was still hooked on heroin. The night of the murder, he goes to the Dragon Den, a pool hall. He couldn't find a game and he left frustrated. He had made $1. Is it impossible to think that someone who had a beef with Tony offered Roosevelt money to take him out? It's not impossible. In my experience, a drug addict that's just desperate for that next fix,
I know.
they are capable of doing anything.
Yeah.
I'm a recovering addict. I've stole, I've done a lot of things, but killing an individual, it just never got that bad.
And although you may not have gone to these ugly measures to do something, thank God, everyone's different.
I don't believe it ever got that bad for him.
Chris and I are very familiar with neighborhoods like yours. And we all knew guys like Roosevelt, guys who stole from their neighbors, sold drugs, poison to the community, anything for some fast money. I think we can all agree that the Roosevelt from 1992 is not someone to be admired.
That same year, 1992, Chicago was in the middle of the crack wars. 940 people were killed in the city. The pressure to make arrests, to show the police were cleaning up the streets was intense. And frankly, that's where a lot of mistakes are made.
So while neither Chris nor I can say 100% that Roosevelt is innocent, we do believe his conviction was unjust. So we want to join your fight. We will hire an aggressive investigator. That person's mission, to interview every single witness, go over every piece of evidence, in the hopes that something will open the door to this case and set Roosevelt free.
And I know this has been a long and hard fight for you, but now you won't have to do it alone. Tanya, when I met Roosevelt in prison, one thing he said, and he was very clear about it, he loves you. And he hopes that you will patiently wait for him until he is free. I want you to take a look at something.
She been through some things in her life. I show her the love that she deserved, and she give it back to me as well. And it's a great, I love her to death. I feel that, you know, I love her and she love me. We can go through, we can overcome everything together.
So I hope one day real soon Roosevelt will walk through that door and he will be greeted by the two women that have fought so hard for his freedom, who understood one thing that the justice system just didn't understand, that even though Roosevelt Miles is a flawed man, he doesn't have the heart of a killer.
Man, I'm just so grateful. Grateful right now. Because you get weary sometimes, and you guys fall right in to help support me at the right time. God answers prayers, that's for sure.
I'm praying that, oh man, that they really find the right person.
It's gonna be a long road, and we'll be right there praying alongside, wishing for the best for Roosevelt and for all of you.
I just can't wait to get to that phone.
Y'all celebrate today. Enjoy the day. Pray, call Roosevelt,
yes,
tell him.
Life is too short.
But tomorrow, fight starts.
All right.